Hi everybody, thanks for watching today's video where I will be presenting how to expose RabbitMQ queuing mechanism through Gravitee API management platform. The main purpose of this video is to explain how it works, go into some details, how you would be able to break the protocols from the default RabbitMQ protocol to different other protocols such as HTTP post to produce message, or Websocket to produce and consume, or webhooks to consume, as well as server sense event. And also how you would be able to leverage the Gravitee platform to centralize all the traffic and monitoring of the traffic that goes from those clients and producer and consumer to RabbitMQ. So for my setup today, I do have a specific setup in RabbitMQ where I have this DNS registry queue exposed through an exchange with a specific routing where each time we have a new DNS routing key is going to be redirecting the message to the DNS registry, or consume the message. On the Gravitee side, I do have this specific API, which, if I look for it, is actually a V4 message API, which is specific to Gravitee, as opposed to the synchronous API. I can be V2 or V4, where you can expose REST, SOAP, or WebSocket or else. V4 API is specifically designed to expose this type of queuing mechanism, like such as Kafka, RabbitMQ, MQ30, Solace, um, as different type of protocols. So I do an existing API created called DNS registry, RabbitMQ, with specific version. So nothing specific here to asynchronous API. The specificity comes when you look at the actual entry point. That's where you're going to be exposing your API, the specific entry point in the gateway. And here you can find the different protocols, whether it's a GET, POST, SSE, Webhook, or WebSocket. You will be able to define which one you can expose through the gateway. For each protocol, you can look at the specific um, quality of service that you can find some instruction on our website here about the different abilities and quality of service available, from auto, non, Atmos once, at least once, which are um, specific to a synchronous world. And each of its protocol will have its specific type of properties, which I won't go into too much details, but basically depending on the entry point you choose and the backend you choose, you will have different and various options. For that specific API, we have chose all the possible entry points. We have chose RabbitMQ as the backend, where we put all the information relative to how to connect to the RabbitMQ exposed in Cloud AMQP, as well as which username and password to use, how to connect, and the actual exchange type, and routing key we want to use for both the producer and the consumer. We also added a specific documentation in Async API, so you can see how in the portal we would expose and document this API. So first, I will log to the developer portal because this specific API here is published in the portal and started. Let's look at it. I look for it, right? And similar to synchronous API in Gravitee, you will find this API as any other API available in the portal. It's not a separate platform, same platform. Here you can find the documentation available. You can eventually interact with it. You can find how to access the actual API. So let's go there and open Postman quickly. I do have an entry here that works as well. Let's remove that. All right. And try to post a new DNS entry into, let's say, for Gravitee.com with a new IP and push it. All right. So by default, it's going to be blocked just because we don't have any public keyless plan um, available in that specific API. If I come back to the configuration, you'll notice in the consumer section that we are either awaiting an API key or push plan. I will go through that, is specific to Webhook, but you have to be authenticated. Fortunately for me, I do have a way to subscribe directly into the portal. So let's go and subscribe. You'll see here you have two plans, the registered plan, which is an API key with the manual validation or the push plan. So let's do with register here. Let's choose a specific application. Let's do, for example, Decathlon. Next, next, validate the request. And since it's a manual validation, if I look at the actual subscription here, it's going to be waiting for an approval. So on the back end, on the APIM side as an admin, you'll have a specific task to validate before it generates an API key for that specific application. So here you see the task, application, request a subscription application, validate the task, look at the details, validate the subscription, validate again, or you can not validate. If you don't want to validate, you can put some expiration date and so on and so forth. So you have the API key, and instead of sending it to your client, you can just self-serve it into the portal, looking at subscription as now accepted, and take the SPI key. So coming back to Postman now, let's add that specific header here, Gravitee API key, and replace it with a new value. And now let's try to push that value. All right, in that case, it's now accepted. And if I go to Cloud AMQP, let's see what happens. So in RabbitMQ here, I do have a little bit of activity, a specific queue. And if I go and get the last 15 message, for example, I do have in the last one, this Gravitee.com, specific IP. So the message has been pushed by Postman to Gravitee, authenticated through API key, and pushed back to RabbitMQ. As I was saying before, we also have other ways. So that was for produce message, but you can also consume message. Okay. And in my case here, I already had subscriptions. Okay. If you look at the specific API again, so let's look at the API. All right, let's go to catalog, DNS registry, and you can see the list of subscribers here, connected applications. Let's look, for example, at application A, subscriptions, DNS registry. There we go. And you can see that this specific one is subscribed through Webhook as well. So same mechanism, you subscribe, and instead of looking at the API key plan, you look to get the push plan. All right, so let's look at that a little bit. So let's go to the catalog, DNS registry, subscribe, and instead of API key, push plan. Here, the way to set it up, you're going to have ability to select the entry point you want, the callback URL you want. So here I'm using a webhook site here. Um, let's create a new entry. Here we go. Let's take that specific URL. That'll be my application A URL. The callback. You could add additional security information, which I won't do here. And say, okay, that's my application decathlon again. Let's put another one. Let's put partner one. Here we go. I did the request. So now let's look at the webhook site. There is no new message. Let's go into Postman and create a new message again. Actually, say gravitysource.com. 10 and send it. Here we go. So here on the webhook side, I received it in real time. All right, as a consumer. If I switch again to Postman, in that case, I'm going to be looking for a WebSocket interaction. Go to the WebSocket here, look at the URL. It's the same, except I'm using WebSocket. And here, I was already connected, and you can tell all the activity that just came in the last 10 minutes. The first one will be in the gravity.com, and the other one being gravitysource.com. And if I want to create a new one called gravity.dk, for example, change it to 10. I can also produce with WebSocket. All right. So I'm producing the message here. I'm sort of receiving it because WebSocket is both ways in my case. All right. And again, I also, since I just produced a new one, it's also available in the webhook. All right. And all of that is going through the gateway, feeding RabbitMQ. And you can see the traffic of that specific API directly into Gravitee. So for each of the protocols, you have a number of requests, 2 WebSocket requests, number of requests for HTTP post, get, webhook, etc., etc. And if you want to look at the actual message that went through in the last 30 minutes, each line corresponds to one. You can see which application was consuming or producing different application, through which plans. Looking at details, you can see details of headers, the request, the message, the content of the message, if there was any. Let's look at that one. Here you see the different message and headers. So again, you'll be applying the same principles on this asynchronous API as you can with synchronous API, which gonna give you the ability to create new use cases for your partner, customer, or your users. In addition to the actual feature, you can also add policies, okay, where on each of the flows, each of the messages that came in and come back for the request phase or response phase, whether at the connection level or message level, you could, for example, apply some transformation, some message filtering, some validation of the format, some conversion. You can also track, change the headers, etc., etc. So for Gravitee users who know how that works, we're basically using the same policies as the one we have with some slight difference since some paradigm are a bit different. Here at the connection level, you could also apply some security, additional security, routing, filtering, threat protection with regular expression, and other type of policies. Thanks again for watching, and don't hesitate to contact us if you have more questions on that specific ability.